So hello everybody, it's Elaine here from Cerebra's communications team. And in our chat today, we're going to be talking all about assistive technology for disabled children, what it is, how it can help, and critically how families can access it. So I'm really pleased today to be joined by Laura Cook, who's a partner at CL Medilaw. Morning, Laura.
Morning, Elaine. Hi.
And also Mike Thrussell, who's a director at Assistive Technology. Good morning, Mike. I just wonder if we could just start with just some introductions, really. Laura, if you could tell us a little bit about what you do at CL Medilaw.
Yeah, of course. So we are serious injury and medical negligence solicitors. We act for many families that are affected by brain injury as a consequence of either negligence in a medical context or perhaps in a sort of an accident situation. We do have particular specialism in child brain injury. We do a lot of we act for a lot of children that have suffered oxygen deprivation at birth that's led to a brain injury, or perhaps other complications during pregnancy or the neonatal period, or even, you know, in subsequent years. So yeah, we work a lot with these families to help them obtain compensation for their injuries and to get the care and other needs met for the rest of their lives.
Thank you, thank you. And Mike, if I could ask the same of you, really, a little bit about what it is that you do.
I'm Director of Access Technology. We're an independent assistive technology consultancy. We're based up in North Yorkshire, and we have about 140 clients now across the country, and we support them with access to education, with communication, independent living, and entertainment, including gaming. The majority of our clients are medical legal cases, so the type of clients that Laura has, and we have about 10% that are discounted clients, which are from parents and things like that we look after. And it's all about matching what the clients wish to achieve, what they want to do, looking at the gaps that they may face as a result of a disability, and then pairing that with some solutions. But we very much keep a regular relationship up with our clients, and we see them often to review how their needs are changing, how their aspirations are changing, and also how the kitten's changing. You know, technology is very fast moving, so it becomes obsolete quite quickly. So we have to keep on top of all those changes, and new things are coming out all the time. Brilliant.
Well, I should say that Laura and Mike have written a great article for Cerebra's website that outlines in more detail just the headlines that we're going to cover today. So, you know, please go ahead and click the link to that to read a little more. But I just wondered if we could just start our chat today with just, perhaps this one's for you, Mike, just explaining what assistive technology is and how it can potentially help with children.
Sure. So assistive technology is ultimately any piece of equipment or software or hardware that can support someone to do something. And it's a very, very vague response, I gather, but we're all using it now, essentially. We've all got Alexas at home, we've all got mobile phones and that sort of thing that enable us to do a little bit more. So for those with disabilities, it helps kind of bridge that gap that might be created by a disability. We look at it in terms of access to education, communication, independent living and entertainment. So not necessarily walking aids, which can be classed internationally as assistive technology. We're looking at the kind of more, I suppose, technology side of things, or things that get plugged in and have screens and batteries and that sort of thing. So for some kids, it really can make the difference in that if they've only got the physical ability to, say, wiggle a knee or control things with their eyes, we can then put an interface in place with a little button that they push or a special camera, which means they can then control some specialist or normal software or some typical software that then enables them to do their schoolwork or to do some work. Or for a lot of them, it's they want to be able to play computer games and shoot things on Fortnite. And because their hands may not be able to hold the controller, we can create these very large controllers or augment something with a big joystick and that sort of thing, which means they can then access that environment.
Fantastic. So they can really use it in all aspects of their lives then, presumably, across the board.
It's not necessarily specialist expensive stuff. It can be, you know, the eye gaze cameras, this one released this week actually by Toby, is a very, very specialist tool for a particular type of user that may not have any hand or other function to be able to control switches. But then it can just be something as simple as a standard laptop, but we just put a little bit of predictive software on there. So they're using Microsoft Word within a school environment, maybe the same as a lot of their peers, but actually we just augment that slightly with changing the way the screen looks, or even just increasing the cursor size and that sort of thing. And that would also be classed as an assistive technology. But a lot of that stuff is baked into the software, which we're in a time now where almost anything's possible. Generally, the limitations seem to be a cognitive limitation, understanding what you're doing. But from a physical limitation point of view, we can pretty much overcome anything with tech. It's just making sure people are now aware that this stuff exists.
Yeah.
And for a couple of setting changes on your mobile phone or a couple of setting changes on your laptop, it can suddenly open up a whole world of actually, I can now do this. And it's all built in, which is a very exciting time. So a lot of this is now about spreading the word. And making sure people are aware.
Yeah. And have you seen how this can work, can benefit families, Laura, through your
Oh yeah, hugely. Yeah, I mean, most or all of our families will, that have been successful in obtaining compensation will have had expert assistive technology assessments and the provision provided. So yeah, I mean, there's one example I'm thinking of. We had a little boy who very acute injury, so very physically disabled but cognitively all there, and he couldn't communicate, and eventually we brought in the eye gaze and he was brilliant at it, and we were actually able to go and take a witness statement from him because he was able to communicate directly with us rather than have to rely on his mum to do her statement. And when we asked him what he wanted as the outcome of his case, he said that he would like I think an orange Lamborghini was one of the things, but something also very kind of pertinent he said was that he wanted to be safe in his house because he was on the ground floor and the rest of the family were upstairs, and so security for him was obviously something that was on his mind, but he was able to communicate that because of the assistive tech that he'd been provided. So yeah, it's amazing. It really is to see it in action. It opens so many opportunities for these children. Yeah,
and it is really empowering them, isn't it? It's enabling their voice to be heard, as you just explained. So
yeah.
So what sort of process do families have to go through to get assistive technology for their children?
Well, so really, I mean, somebody like Mike, an assistive technology consultant that knows what they're talking about, the ideal way is to have someone like that go in to meet the family, meet the child, and work out what it is that child needs, what they like, what they don't like, and what are the problems, what are the obstacles to getting to where they want to be, and then figuring out and recommending the best technology that is going to get them there. So Mike obviously can explain better about how that process works, and then perhaps after I'll talk about how they can fund that.
Yeah,
the way we would typically work with the clients, we would meet them at home and school, often on separate days, because it's a bit much to meet a stranger at school, and they arrive home and then here I am again. It's a bit much, I think. So, and we will look at very much what are you wanting to achieve. Everything needs to be outcome orientated for us. So the example you've given there is the client was able to communicate their needs. The witness statement is fantastic, but it's not about using the eye gaze. It's not about controlling that thing. It's about what can I do with this. So we're trying to find out what do they want to do, and typically for our younger clients, it might be I want to play Xbox, I want to shoot people in Fortnite, I want to drive a racing car on these things, because that's what their peers are doing. That's what they're talking about at school. The support team around that person will then have other ideas. We want them to be able to complete their schoolwork. It's not often we get kids telling us that, but I'm sure their teachers and their parents want to. And then there are other elements as well in terms of families feeling safe. We've just put in something simple like a ring camera upstairs in the kid's bedroom. He had a quiet voice. He wasn't able to call downstairs, and mum was constantly running up and downstairs and leaving the kitchen just to check on him. So to be able to have a little screen in her kitchen on these mainstream devices and a little Alexa echo show and a little ring camera, so she can just keep an eye on him and know that he's okay. And it's those sort of things, finding out what is useful for this family, and then pairing that to what solutions there may be. And then there's a lot of intervention work about supporting the family, supporting the team around that client to help them work with. And we call it the golden bubble of joy when the team is good and it's right. So you've got the teaching assistants, you've got the carers, you've got mum, you've got grandma, and the wider team as well, and making sure that they are really on board and understanding this. If not, it can fail, you know. So there is, unfortunately, a high degree of AT abandonment isn't actually a term that's officially coined, unfortunately, where people buy the equipment and it's not used because people have gone about, because it's shiny, because it's exciting. They haven't looked at, what do I actually want to do with this? What do I want to actually achieve? And for a child or for a client, you know, what do they want to do? And creating those environments. And often what we find is the skills that we learn in the motivational setting, so computer games, clicking those buttons to drive a character or using a joystick, they will transfer very, very nicely into what we need to do to communicate, to complete schoolwork and to do those things. So we've got a really exciting remit here. We can go into somewhere fun and play-based, and it translates very nicely over to the other elements of their lives, and they're keen and motivated to do it. So I believe I've forgotten your question and not really answered it, but it's in terms of how the process works. We do the assessment typically, we meet their needs and we find out what they are, and then once that report is agreed by the funders, we can then go in and continue to do that regular work and review and that sort of thing.
Fantastic. So it really is, as you say, identifying the need and then working out the best way of meeting that need. And then I suppose we come to the tricky question of funding, as you mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
How can this happen?
Yeah, so I mean, there's a few options. The first thing I'll say is, like Mike has already mentioned, that sometimes it's not always terribly expensive. Sometimes there might be smaller adjustments, smaller things that can be introduced that will make a huge difference. So, you know, doesn't necessarily have to be a huge expense. However, it can be expensive, and especially when there needs to be regular reviews, regular training, regular replacement of equipment, that kind of thing. Overall, it can get expensive. So there are a number of options. I think, obviously, from our point of view, we see families that have compensation claims. So they're, because the injury was caused, the brain injury has been caused by medical negligence, then, there's a compensation payout. And then obviously part of that compensation will be for the assistive technology. So an expert would have come in as part of the case, assessed the needs, and that would have been claimed as part of the compensation. So it's there as a pot of money specifically for that purpose. So, not every family or every child is going to have a medical negligence or personal injury claim. So compensation may not be an option. For a child, especially a child that, has a brain injury, often there are special educational needs, and an EHCP, an Education, Health and Care Plan, might be in place or is being put in place. And assistive technology provision can be included as part of that plan. If there is an educational need, such as to access their learning, to be able to communicate with their teacher, or to be able to produce work, they need some form of technology, then that needs to be assessed. The local authority has a duty, and the parents and the family can ask for that assessment to be made. Often the assessment in that sort of sense is done by the people already around the child, the professionals already around the child. I don't know if Mike has any experience of being asked to do an assessment on behalf of the local authority. I'm not sure, but so again, I think parents probably need to be quite proactive in ensuring that the right sort of assessments are taking place. So as long as there is a need identified, and then a provision is put in the right bit of the EHCP, section F, then the local authority has a duty to fund that and implement it. As long as the provision is detailed enough, clear enough, then the local authority has to provide it, has to fund it, and ensure it's implemented. So that is another option that as a means to fund the assistive technology. There are also other services which Mike probably knows slightly more about, that, you know, other statutorily funded services, which I think we're going to put some of the links to some of these places as part of the article. And also there are charities. There are various charities around that you know, can help provide or contribute to providing the right sort of technology for a child with a brain injury or disability. So yeah, we'll put some of the links to some of those organisations as part of the article. I don't know if there's anything else you wanted to pitch in.
I think you've done it very well, but absolutely the avenues of the HCP are hard, because you also need to know what you're trying to put into the HCP, and sometimes you have to put in an assessment into the HCP prior on 1 year, and then on the review, because actually we now know we need a joystick or clicker or something specific. So it's very hard to know what specific thing you're going to put in, and Senkos often aren't necessarily fully aware of the options and things around that. So sometimes it is a tricky process, but we've been asked to support with EHCP reviews and also EHCP tribunals when they've been contested. In terms of the charitable and statutory funding for communication difficulties, that is well supported in the UK. There's a new website, assistive-technology.org.uk, which collates all the AAC hubs. AAC is augmentative and alternative communication, or the other way around, alternative and augmentative communication. And that is things like talking boxes. Stephen Hawking is the classic example there, but it might be access to a speech and language therapist who can support with symbol-based communication or other means to do that. They'll provide kit and hopefully training and intervention with the schools. And they're typically welcome into the schools as well, coming from the NHS. Mm-hmm. Charities, you've got two good gaming ones that will do assessment and loans. There's Special Effect and there's Everyone Can. They will meet a client and they will help them achieve what they want to do on their gaming, and they will assess what the best way of access is. Typically OT driven, so they will look at mounting and various bits of kit. We've just started up a new charity to offer the same service we do as a company to those without the funding. It's in its very, very early stages. We've just put our first bid in, but that's the point of that, is to offer access to education and entertainment and communication for children that don't have access to other funding means. So that's the remit of that, because we recognise that we can go into a classroom, we can see a child that we have the opportunity to work with regularly and provide the very best equipment for, and sat next to them is another child that it just doesn't have the same access to that, and it feels a little wrong somehow. So we can try to bridge that gap and trying to help fulfill their needs as well.
And presumably, Laura, again, we don't have time to go into all of the detail today, but if there's a family that has an EHCP plan currently in place for their child that doesn't include the assistive technology, best to just get some specialist help on that. Is it some deeper advice?
I think if parents or carers are concerned that there are assistive technology needs that aren't included in the plan, and the best time is at the annual review. So to raise that in the meeting when the annual review is taking place, to raise the concerns, ask for an assessment. The local authority does have a duty to take heed of parental or carer concerns and suggestions, and ask for an assessment to be performed. There is, it would cost, but there is the option of paying privately for an independent expert assessment that then feeds into the local authority, their assessment overall before the plan is finalised. So I know some families do that, and whilst it's a cost to begin with, it can lead to often better provision within the EHCP.
I've had experience with that personally. My son is autistic and didn't have any HCP in place, and we were really struggling to get on. And bear in mind, I'm in this sector, this is my field, and yet I was still struggling. It makes me realise how hard it must be for a lot of parents. So I ended up commissioning somebody privately to support with the education needs for him, and then that report was fed into the HCP, and then it was successfully managed to get him a part-time TA for him. So I've seen that journey myself. It's
perfect example. If the plan is then finalised, and then the family doesn't think that there is adequate provision, or that there is provision specified but it's not being implemented, then you can then make a formal complaint to the local authority on the issue. If that doesn't get you anywhere, there's the Education Ombudsman that will review these matters as well. As a sort of last resort, there's the appeal process to the first tier tribunal, to have it ordered that the EHCP is amended. That's where I would definitely say it's best to get legal advice. Often solicitors can, would give some general advice to help you navigate your way through that process. But if you are going to get to the actual appeal, then best to have some legal representation, I would say. So it can get expensive. That's why I think it's a last resort, but it can often lead to a better outcome for the child and the EHCP. So yeah, so there's a number of options. As a process, there are processes to follow if they don't think that the needs are being met adequately.
Okay. So it's been really lovely to chat with you both today. And just before we sort of come to an end, I just wanted to ask you if there was one piece of advice or information that you'd like to give to a family who's listening to this and thinking, oh gosh, yes, I hadn't thought about this, didn't know anything about it. What can I do to find out more? What would you tell them? Put you on the spot now.
Yeah, give us a call and we'll chat through your needs. My always focus on what the client wants to achieve. That's where it's going to be successful. So even though the rest of the team around them want them to complete their schoolwork or to achieve their aims, there's enough people around them making them do work. Let's look at what they want to do, and that way you get the buy-in. You also get the buy-in from the people that love that child around them, the carers, the TAs, the parents. They really get to see the change that AT can bring, and it stops being this scary, don't know how to enter world, and becomes just an acumen that actually tech helps bridge the gap a little bit. I've seen it. He's now able to, or the client's now able to do whatever it is they want to do, and use a phone to text somebody because we did this slight change and that sort of thing. And they get that buy-in that tech is going to have the answer and that belief into it, because it generally will do. We live in such an amazing time where it's all feasibly possible, and it's just getting that understanding, that buy-in. So find something they want to do, and is my first port of call, so motivation.
Brilliant, thank you. As I say, it's been really lovely to chat to you. We will put the links, as you both mentioned, in the article which is on our website, and there'll also be a link to it with this post. So again, thank you so much for your time, and maybe catch up again soon to talk a bit more about what's possible for children. Thank you both.
Great, thanks Elaine.
Thanks very much.
Bye.
Bye.